It's my pleasure to present the next speaker, Dráulio Barros de Araújo. He's a professor of neuroimaging at the Brain Institute of Universidade Federal do Rio Grande do Norte in Natal, Brazil. And he has been conducting a large clinical trial for the use of ayahuasca in the treatment of depression. Thank you, Dráulio.
Thank you, Bia. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. It is, in fact, a great pleasure to be here and be part of this very special moment for psychedelic science. I'd like to thank Bia for organizing the plant track, for inviting us, and the organization, MAPS, and all the organizations involved in this endeavor of organizing this meeting. My idea today is to tell you a story that began in 2008 when we first heard many anecdotal reports from many churches in Brazil that uses ayahuasca as their sacrament, telling us that there were many people in the churches that seemed to get better from mood disorders. From this anecdotal perspective, we began to try to look for the steps that we need to take and all the steps that any medications would need to take in order to be tested scientifically, the efficiency as, in this case, an antidepressant. So the story I'm going to tell you is basically all the steps that we should do, that anyone should do, if you're interested in testing that substance as an antidepressant. I work at the Brain Institute as a professor in the Brain Institute in Natal, Brazil. But part of this work, the beginning of this work was mainly developed in the south part of Brazil, in a city called Ribeirão Preto, under the supervision of a psychiatrist called Jaime Halleck. So when you are about to try to understand the antidepressant effect of a substance, the first thing you need to do is to first understand how safe it is to have that substance used by a special group of individuals, in this case, people that had depression. So basically attesting the safety of using that substance to that group. How is it that that substance will interact with that specific group of individuals? And the second thing you need to do is do a preliminary evaluation of the effect of that substance on the outcome that you're interested in this case, the antidepressant effect. So the first study we did, So just to give you a brief overview and some facts about depression, there's about 300 million people with depression. Out of this, about 30% do not respond to the available antidepressant medications that we have today. And these antidepressant medications that we have nowadays have another issue, which is all of them take about 2 weeks to start having a significant antidepressant effect, which is a big issue. So consider that if you had a fever, I'll give you a medication, and that will take 15 days to cure a fever or to have an impact on your fever. So this is a big issue. I mean, when you have a medication, you expect that medication would have an impact right when that medication is being accessed by the patient. So with that perspective, we started a first open-label trial with ayahuasca. What's an open-label trial? So basically, an open-label trial is a trial in which the patient and the researcher, we both know that the substance you're giving to the individual is the active substance. So in other words, you're not controlling for the placebo. We did that in 6 patients with what we call treatment-resistant depression. So by treatment-resistant depression, we understand a group of patients that did not respond to at least 2 different medications, antidepressant medications of different classes. We recruited in this first study, we recruited 6 patients. In this open label study, we recruited 6 patients with treatment-resistant depression. And we had a single dose of ayahuasca given to these individuals. And we followed what happened to their depressive symptoms using 2 different clinical scales for depression. But what you see here are these 2 lines here are the 2 scales that we used to access depression. The higher this number is, most severe the individual is in terms of symptoms. So what you see here in this first part is the experimental session that goes from 0 to 180 minutes. And then we follow these patients 1 day after the dosing session, 7 days after, 14 days, and 20 days after. What we see here in these 6 patients is a decrease in the depressive symptoms already 1 day after dosing. So you have a significant decrease 1 day after dosing. We increased the number of individuals that we recruited, so we increased the number of patients to 17 patients, and we did a follow-up study with 17 patients. And these are the results from the 17 patients. So you do see that the results still consistent. If you look at now, these 2 scales here are the Madras scale and Hamilton D scales. Again, 2 clinical scales applied to access the severity of depression. This other scale that you see here, the CAD scale, is basically showing an effect during the dosing session. So there is a psychedelic effect, so to say, in these individuals. And the antidepressant effect becomes significant. 1 day, it's very robust, the result we have 1 day after dosing. And that persists for 21 days. In this first study, the individuals were free of medications for 21 days. So all these results that we are showing here are related to individuals that are antidepressant free. The second thing we did in this study was to have our volunteers go into a SPECT evaluation, to a single photon emission computed tomography evaluation, to understand basically if 8 hours after the dosing session, we would have any areas of the brain with an increased blood flow, which would be related to an increased modulation during the dosing session. And our results show 3 main structures that were modulated or that had an increased blood flow 8 hours after the session, which includes the nuclear accumbens, the insula, and the subgenual cortex. So that you know, the subgenual cortex is the main marker for depression nowadays when in regard to neuroimaging tools. And we do see then a modulation in the subgenual cortex in an area that seems to be very important for depression in these individuals 8 hours after dosing. The main problem with this study is basically that we did not control for the placebo. And that's a big issue. Big issue because the placebo effect in depression, especially in clinical trials for depression, can reach up to 40%. 40, 50%. So it means that in clinical trials for depression, about 40% of your patients can have a positive response to the placebo. So it might be that what we are seeing in this first study and in any open label study for depression would be due to the placebo effect and not to the effect of the substance itself. So in 2010, we started this, the second step of this project, which was to have a randomized placebo-controlled trial. So a trial that would try to prevent or try to control the data for the placebo effect and for and try to blind how is the treatment which treatment was being given to that individual. So this is the trial. The trial started in 2010. We started programming the trial. In January 2014, we started data acquisition. So we started recruiting the patients. We recruited 218 patients, out of which 35 got recruited to the trial. Most of these patients, they were excluded from the trial because they did not attend to some of the inclusion criteria. For instance, patients with bipolar disorders were not included, or that had family history of bipolar disorders. Patients that had schizophrenia or family history of schizophrenia, they were not included in the trial. And patients that did not have a typical treatment-resistant depression, meaning that they hadn't tried 2 different antidepressants for the time that they had depression, and from different classes. So we had 35 individuals going into the trial. They were split in 2 groups, so half of our individuals were submitted to a session with a single dose of ayahuasca. We're using the batch, we're using the brew. This brew was given by a friend of ours who runs a church in the north of Brazil. So basically what he did a single batch that we used throughout the whole trial. We were dosing the amount of ayahuasca based on the concentration of DMT that we have in our own batch. So half of the individuals drank ayahuasca, half of the individuals drank a placebo that we made a placebo, which had basically the same color, a weird taste, and it was brown. So it was brown. But what's important is that all of our individuals were naive to ayahuasca. All of our individuals were naive to a psychedelic experience. So this was the first psychedelic experience that these individuals have. None of our individuals were self-referred, which means that none of our individuals asked to participate in our trial. All of our individuals were selected from the population in the clinics that we were recruiting these patients. So then what we did, we split them in half had ayahuasca and half had the placebo. So we end up with a group of 29 individuals. The trial was a little bit more ambitious, I'd say, because besides evaluating the antidepressant effect of ayahuasca, we also wanted to evaluate different biomarkers that are related to ayahuasca. So what I mean is that these individuals, they were in the trial for 4 days. They would arrive in the hospital on Tuesday. They do a whole bunch of evaluations before the dosing, which included MRI, which included neuropsychological evaluation, neuropsychiatry evaluation, blood sampling, and a sleep EEG. So from Tuesday to Wednesday, they slept in the lab. On Wednesday morning, they wake up in the lab, they have blood sampling, and then on Wednesday, we did the dosing session. So on Wednesday, the whole day, we were with them during the dosing session, either ayahuasca or placebo. And then they would come back to the hospital on Thursday to repeat the whole battery of exams again. And then they were discharged on Friday. So it's a 4-day experiment for each individual. Besides the 35 patients that we did, we also did 50 individuals that were healthy individuals. So in total, we did 85 individuals. That went through this machine. So it ended up that it was a 3-year project. We started in January 2014, and we have just completed the trial in December last year, December 2016. As far as clinical scale goes, psychiatry evaluation for the depressive symptoms, we had, this is pretty much how it goes. The patients went through a washout period, which means that they were under a specific antidepressant, they were not responding, and they were about to change the antidepressant medication that they were taking. In this period, then they're not using any antidepressant. At the end of the washout period, then we had a single intervention with ayahuasca. And 7 days after the intervention, they were back to another treatment. So they had another consult with their psychiatrist, and then the treatment scheme was changed. The reason why I'm telling you this is that the first analysis we made was during the period that the individuals were not under the influence of other antidepressant. So all the results that I'm going to present go all the way to 7 days after dosing, which is the period that they are not taking any other antidepressant, and also to allow a direct comparison between our data and the ketamine data, which is another promising fast and rapid antidepressant. This is our setting. So this is our room. It's a very simple room, a very clean room, which this is where the individuals would sleep in the lab twice. And this is the recliner where they would go through the whole experimental session. So during the dosing session, they would just be in the recliner listening to music that we brought from UDV. Toffoli was very helpful in bringing up the musics that we were playing. And they stayed here. There were always 2 people following them throughout the dosing session. We did not interfere very much with their experience. We only interfere when we thought that it was important to interfere, when we thought that they were going through difficult moments. And the way that we interfere with their experience was very simple, was just by touching them, calling them by their names, and that was it. These are the first results we have. So basically, this is one scale, the MADRS scale. What you see in red are the results for the ayahuasca group. What you see in blue are the results for the placebo group. So the first thing, and that's going to become more clear later, we have a high placebo effect, as we expect. We didn't expect that high of a placebo effect, but anyway, we did have a high placebo effect. But it seems as though that the effect 1 day after dosing of ayahuasca, it is already statistically different, and that persists from 1 to 7 days. If we analyze it and we compare it to ketamine, we do see that the effects are different in a sense that our greatest effect occurs, let me just go back a little bit so that you can appreciate the effect size. So the effect size is already large 1 day after dosing. It keeps large 2 days after dosing, and it increases significantly 7 days after dosing. So what I mean when I say that 7 days after dosing is where we had the highest effect, a difference between these 2 groups. So while we have the greatest effect 7 days after dosing, ketamine usually have the highest effect 1 day after dosing. If you are interested in this, we have a poster today that's presented by Fernanda Palhano, who's here. So we did some quantitative analysis in the comparison between ketamine and ayahuasca. This is another way of looking at this data. So we could appreciate the response rate of these these 2 groups. So the response rate is a way of measuring effectiveness of your treatment. So what we are accessing here is basically counting the number of individuals that reduced their symptoms in 50% of what they had initially. So if they had a score in the severity scale of 30, and if that score changed to 15, then we call this guy a responder. So what we see here is the proportion of responders in these 2 groups. The first thing which I want to call your attention to is the high response rate of ayahuasca. So the response rate of ayahuasca and the high response rate of the placebo. And 1 day after dosing, 50% of all individuals that were in the ayahuasca group responded, while 46% in the placebo group responded. This number increased in the day 2. We had 77% of the placebo group responding, and 64% of the placebo group, 77 in the ayahuasca, 64 in the placebo. And in this 3rd day, we have 64% of ayahuasca responding and 27% of the placebo group responding. The placebo is very high. The placebo response is very high. It's very significant. So you see here that like in day 2, you have 64% of our individuals responding. There are some explanations for this very high placebo effect. The first one is that 76% of our patients had personality disorder, 90% of cluster B. And this is very significant because most, if not all, of the trials with psychedelics, depression, personality disorder is an exclusion criteria. We did not use, that's 5 minutes, we did not use that as an exclusion criteria. What happens is that people with personality disorder tend to have a high placebo response. So that probably increased the placebo response that we had. The second point is that most of our patients come from very low socioeconomic status, low house income, low number of years of school, and they live in a very stressful neighborhood. When they come to our lab, that is a 5-star hotel. Some of our patients asked to stay in the lab from Friday to Saturday or to spend the weekend in the lab. Some of them wanted to stay in the lab, to sleep in the lab for the whole, they didn't want to go home after the session. So that happened, and that naturally increased what we call a placebo effect. So in our group, you're not calling it the placebo effect, it's more of a care effect. I mean, you're 4 days taking care of someone that generally that's no one taking care of them. So that probably accounts to this high placebo effect. Although this high placebo effect was found, we do see that there is ayahuasca, the effect of ayahuasca is even increased. This is just to go through some of the examples of the patients, just to get attention to two things. The first one is that our patients tend to suffer a lot more than the healthy individuals. So these are some of the reports of our patients. Some of them would say that they got in contact with the essence of pain. So a lot of them had a lot of suffering. A lot of their experiences had a lot of suffering involved. The second thing is the relation between the experience and psychotherapy. Some patients reported that they even liked or they disliked the experience because they associated the experience with a psychotherapy. So some of our individuals would say, I didn't like the experience for the same reasons I don't like psychotherapy. And some of them would say that felt like 1 year of psychotherapy. Another important issue in this type of study is study blindness. So how is it that you blind someone? I mean, if someone drinks ayahuasca, there's no way you're going to blind that individual from knowing that he drank ayahuasca. As a matter of fact, 100% of our individuals said that they have taken ayahuasca when they have taken ayahuasca. So what is it that you can do? What you can do is to use what we call an active placebo. So a placebo that has some effects, and those effects might confuse the patients. So our placebo brings a little bit of nausea. So a lot of some of our patients, 27% of our patients, they had nausea under the placebo. One of our healthy individuals vomited, and 2 had diarrhea. So it had an effect in the bowel. So the first thing we did is to use then an active placebo. The second thing we did was we had a team of 5 psychiatrists, and they were running on rotation. So to blind the psychiatrists, we had one psychiatrist that would do the experimental session, and then sometimes the same psychiatry would not evaluate the patient anymore. You'd be evaluated by some other psychiatrist that was not in the experimental session. So that, I'm just telling you this to say that we are aware of the problem of blindness, and we're just trying to find creative ways of having a detour on that. This is a huge project. It involves a lot of people, so actually I'm here representing these 30-some people from different specialties, from different parts of the country, from different institutions. So I'm just representing these people here. I'd like to thank them, everyone that was involved in this. Part of our placebo effect is certainly due to the fact that the people that were in this trial are really nice people. So we were really lucky to recruit such a nice group of people that were really into taking care of whoever was there. So that was our primary goal, that all of our individuals would leave the hospital saying, I was well treated, I liked the experiences. So all of our individuals said, we felt safe, we liked it, thank you. I'd like to thank just the institutions. This project was wholly funded by the Brazilian government, and the Brain Institute, the hospital where we had that, and the financial agencies and the Brazilian government for supporting this initiative. So thank you so much for listening.
Hello. Thank you, Dráulio. I would like to start making a question myself. So you mentioned that you have done, used one single batch of ayahuasca throughout the studies, so you would have a problem that you could always know the concentration of DMT.
Right.
That's kind of seemed to be a kind of light and creative and easy way to go around the problem of standardization. How likely do you think it would be possible, for example, to convince the FDA here in the USA to do a clinical trial with ayahuasca using the liquid brew, but one single batch? How likely do you think that would work here? Do you have any idea?
Well, the first thing is the strategy we made. We were dosing along the whole study. As the study was 3 years long, so we were dosing this single batch just to make sure that it was pretty stable. It seems to be stable, but not that much stable. So that's an issue that you need to control that. But I certainly think that using the batch, using the brew, in my opinion, the idea behind using a pill is to increase the blindness. But in fact, you don't increase the blindness by using a pill. Because, for instance, if you drink a pill, and then you, what do you call it when you go like, blah? Blah? Well, I don't know what you call that. Burp, right. So you feel it right away. So, it's a mysticism that, there is another issue in the blindness stuff, which is the effect. So it doesn't really matter if you're using in this sense, it doesn't really matter if you're using the pill or the liquid. And that's the reason why we opt to go with the liquid, which is, the way that people have been using it. And one thing that we're doing in our trial is trying to import as many help from as many traditions as we can to bring this to a safety. So I think that the best strategy to do would be to go with the brew. Tá?
So I see your popular talk. We have 5 minutes for lunch break, and we do respect our lunch break. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take 3 on a row, and then you can, comment 1 or 2 or 3 or none, and we're just gonna try to give space for more people. And
I'll make sure I'll do fast.
Yeah, please go fast with the questions too. Let's see if we can make the line.
First of all, I was very impressed by the methodology of your studies. It seems very high quality methodologically. And then my question is, it seems like you were using doses sufficient to produce profound mystical type experiences, as in the psilocybin research. And did you run correlations of the intensity of the mystical experience with the therapeutic effect?
We're just doing that. We don't have the results yet, but we're doing both with the mystical. We're focused right now with the correlation between the HRS, hallucinogenic rating scale, with the effects they had later on. And we're trying also to dissect the idea that, trying to understand a little bit better what we are calling the suffering, and how much suffering, in the case of ayahuasca, has to do with the improvement afterwards. So these are our goal.
It's a very simple question, and it's good as 3 questions because you can jump this one, skip this one if you want. But how difficult is to publish this type of results?
Very difficult. Very difficult. We've submitted it to already 9 different journals, and we haven't got it through. Although that's very interesting because we don't have a significant critique on our method, on our on the results. It's all the time is an editorial decision. It's an editorial decision not to publish for some reason that I really don't know what that is, but it's not science.
So I understand the trial was designed to study depression outcomes up to 7 days, but you have the experience of working with these individuals and doing the open label study from before. So I imagine there's some kind of duration of time that you would guess that ayahuasca works to treat depression, similar to the psilocybin seems to last a lot longer than ketamine does. Mm-hmm. How long do you think that duration is?
The thing is that with the data we have, it's very variable, and variable in both sides, in the sense that a lot of people in the placebo did have a significant response for very long. So we really have to appreciate the placebo effect as something positive, but as something that influences very much your data. So it's difficult in the long run. I mean, we have people, if you look at the remission rate, for instance, so people that are cured after a single session, the remission rate in the placebo group is very high. So it's very difficult to, in the long run, then you have an interaction with the new medication that they have. So it's, what I'm saying is that part of the result we have in the long run for ayahuasca is certainly influenced by the results of the placebo effect. So it's, for now, I'd say that it's very preliminary to say that we would have a response for a single session that would last a lot longer than 2 weeks. Pode.
So everybody will make a question and he will just make one single final comment.
How did you get people in middle of their first psychedelic experience answer the questions about their depression?
I'm sorry.
People were in middle of their first time psychedelic experience, presumably very intense mystical experiences. How could they answer the questionnaires about the
good question.
state?
You mentioned that 76% of your sample had personality disorders.
Yes.
What made you go with that sample?
We didn't choose. Oh, sorry.
As we know, depression is a chronic, lifelong disorder. Is there any negative repercussions to using ayahuasca to treat depression for decades, for instance?
There's a tremendous value in the imaging and neurophysiologic data that you collected. Can you shed some insight into what you saw with that?
If you were going to do this again, would you choose a population that was treatment resistant or who had recurrent depression? And also a second question is, how do you think the fact that you recruited via the clinic affected your results as opposed to people actually seeking out the experience?
So this is a psychopharm question, which may be on the scope of this topic, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on the sigma receptor, and which many people attribute to DMT's unique qualities. DMT, unlike other 5-HT2A agonists, has this sigma receptor activity. Methamphetamine also has sigma receptor activity, so yet there's been shown to be anti-inflammatory activity with this receptor, and maybe that's what's different about ayahuasca. Is that a positive thing? Have you considered blocking that with antagonist in any of your studies of the biomarkers?
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to know about the sleep EEG effects, and also at some point talk to you about your SPEC data, which completely contrasts with our MR data. But maybe you have some MR data as well now?
Yes.
The problem of these conferences is that everybody's an expert, so it's too hard. And I just want to say that Dráulio is going to be presenting on University of California, San Francisco on April 25th. After this event, we have a post-event, and it's free, and you're all invited, and he's going to give a long lecture there.
Okay. I'm going to try to go really fast. First, about the questionnaires, when we apply the questionnaires. Actually, we applied the questionnaires after the experience had been over. So at the end of the experimental session, we try not to interfere as much. As a matter of fact, in our first set of patients, we would have the first psychiatry evaluation 40 minutes after. But that was so disturbing because 40 minutes after is when they're starting to feel something. And then we decided not to do the 40 minutes evaluation anymore. We only have a 1 hour and 40 minutes evaluation, just a psychiatrist evaluation. And then all the scales we apply at the end of dosing session. Geez, I can't understand my own hand left. Sorry. So the self-referred question, the main thing is that is a high placebo effect. I mean, if you have a previous experience with psychedelics and you believe that had an effect, then you're really a lot more prone to a placebo because you really believe that that's going to work. As opposed to our individuals that, they don't even really know what a psychedelic experience is. Personality disorder, basically we didn't choose. We were having a very hard time finding the patients. And as that was not an exclusion criteria for our patients, we decided just to do it and go for it. And in fact, you see, I mean, there's a high placebo effect. And the second thing I have to mention is that, indeed, the experience of the individuals, so part of the suffering that we are seeing might be due to the personality disorder that we have in our sample. About the data, so that responds to, we do have a lot of data collected, but we have just started analyzing it. Both the sleep EEG, we also, during the dosing session, we have an EEG hooked up. And saliva cortisol. So that's just, we're just starting to analyze that. And we do have MRI, but we don't have an acute MRI. We just have before and after. The same thing that you guys did with psilocybin. I think that's it. So if you guys want, I'll be here. It will be a pleasure to talk to whoever, have more questions. So thank you.